Hello mortals, I am the BookTube Goddess, the #1 drag queen booktuber on YouTube. I was tagged by the creator of the tag, Eric from Breakeven Books, who created the Barking Bout Books tags, and I believe I was the only one he tagged. What? He tagged a couple dozen people? Aww. Now this tag was inspired by the passing away of his beloved furry companion Max. And if you've had a pet that has passed away, you know how much that can impact you. So I am delighted to do this tag.
So my first prompt is going to be, I've got a bone to pick with you, and this is to name a book that was good until it wasn't. So a book that you were enjoying and then it ended up disappointing you.
Well, the book I'm thinking about is Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, published in 2019, sometime last year. Anyway, I started reading it before I really joined BookTube, and since I get most of my books on Kindle, I just saw the blurb for it, and I thought it sounded interesting, and I had no idea how long it was because I don't look at that. So I was wondering why it was taking me so long to read this darn book. And one of the reasons why I picked it up, and this is really a pet peeve of mine, is that it said an LGBT version of Game of Thrones, something like that. Well, here's the thing. I don't think this was an LGBT book. And I think it was a real disservice to the author because there is this gay relationship, but it was written like it was supposed to be a surprise, and it wasn't a big plot point. But since the publisher decided to market it as an LGBT book, I was kind of on the lookout. Okay, where's the LGBT stuff? There's this little minor character that couldn't be it. Oh, I bet it's going to be this, and it was this. So, anyway, this for me was a sort of typical fantasy, and there was nothing surprising about it, and it just seemed to drag on so long that I sort of lost interest. And there was like a couple of revelations, like what is this Priory of the Orange Tree, and these characters that seem ultra powerful, what are their backstories? And you eventually do get to it, but by that time I couldn't really relate to any of the characters. None of them impressed me, and this is one of those books where I started out really liking it and looking forward to where it goes, and by the end I didn't care. I just didn't care.
The next one is Welcome Home. So this is to name a book that gives you those warm feelings of home. It could be a book or a series.
Well, I've mentioned Lord of the Ring and Narnia enough times. I'm going to try to choose something different. So I think I'm going to go with John Carter of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. And it's a big series of about 11 books. It starts off with A Princess of Mars, published way back in 1912. And it ends with John Carter of Mars, which was published in the 1940s. And actually that last book are two novellas squished together. But there was a revival of Edgar Rice Burroughs, I guess it was in the 70s, and they came out with these gorgeous covers, and I was really drawn to them as a young person, and they just really stuck with me. And I reread them. I so much wanted to be John Carter, or did I want to be the Princess of Mars? Anyway, for me, it brings back a lot of nostalgia, and unfortunately, the movie was a bit of a dud, and I didn't actually mind the movie, but oh well. But my understanding was there was an executive at Disney who was probably like me, who was a big John Carter fan. He was coming from the point of, well, it's John Carter of Mars. John Carter is just as iconic as Batman or Superman or Tarzan, which was Edgar Rice Burroughs. But unfortunately, very few people remembered poor John Carter. Anyway, the premise is kind of interesting because he's a Civil War veteran who somehow finds a cave that he falls asleep in, and he mystically travels to Mars, where there's this vibrant civilization. And I don't know how much it still holds up these days. All I know is when I read it, I loved it. They are pulpy science fantasy stories. There's really no science at all in them. They're just fun.
The next prompt is Ruffin It, and this is to name a book that has a journey or has a travel element to it.
I did this for another tag, but I will mention it again. Around the World with Auntie Mame by Patrick Dennis, published in 1958, 3 years after the seminal Auntie Mame was published. Now, if you don't know who Auntie Mame is, look it up. Now, if you ask people now who Auntie Mame is, they'll probably think about the movie, which is fantastic with Rosalind Russell, about an eccentric aunt who raises a young nephew.
But darling, I'm your Auntie Mame!
Who's this complete bohemian. Anyway, this is set later in the novel where Patrick Dennis, who is also the main character, talks about when he traveled the world with Auntie Mame, and it's a frame narrative. Because at the end of Auntie Mame, the first book, Mame takes Patrick's son off to India.
School begins the day after Labor Day. He must be back by then.
Naturally. Of course. Labor Day. That's sometime in November, isn't it?
But in this novel, it fast forwards 2 years later, and she still hasn't brought him home. So Patrick is trying to reassure his wife that everything was okay because nothing happened when he traveled with Auntie Mame, but then that would open up a chapter which shows what happened in his travels with Auntie Mame, which weren't safe at all. Now, each chapter can really be read as a short story, and that's kind of how Patrick Dennis wrote Mame as well. Now, one interesting thing was the publisher rejected one of the chapters because it took place in the USSR, and it was published during the Cold War. Now, Patrick Dennis, the writer, that was his pen name, of course, but he's really a fascinating character because he stopped writing and he went to work as a butler, eventually working for the CEO of McDonald's. And the CEO had no idea who Patrick Dennis was.
Then we have Marking Your Territory, and this is to name a book or series that you will always stand by, no matter what.
Well, it has to be Lord of the Rings. I will always stand by it. It was the book that really propelled me into reading adult books. I've reread it multiple times, and I reread it sort of when I was down and out. So I feel like I owe a lot to Lord of the Rings.
The next prompt is Diggin Holes, a book that had some hidden secrets or a big plot twist that was uncovered.
Well, I just read the book Wasp Factory by Ian Banks, which was published in the mid-'80s. That book. It's about a 16-year-old psychopath, and that's how it's presented. It's about this boy who does horrible things. He's murdered 3 people when he was like a very young child, and he's really wackadoodle for these rituals that he's developed, which he believes gives him these supernatural powers. So it's a really, really disturbing book, and there are so many twists and turns to it, and I did not see the end coming. Usually I can. Usually I'm pretty good at seeing the build-up. And I actually, maybe a couple times I thought, was it going in this direction? Nah, it can't be, but it did. So I don't know if I actually recommend this book to people, but, boy, it's a book.
Then we have Stand By Me, and this is to choose a book or a series that portrayed a very loyal friendship within its characters.
Well, I have to mention the relationship between Fitz and the Fool by Robin Hobb. Now, that's the name of the last trilogy, but those two characters, Fitz and the Fool, are linked together throughout the realm of the Elderlings universe. The relationship starts in the very, very first trilogy, the Farseer trilogy, and continues into the Tawny Man trilogy, and concludes in the Fitz and the Fool trilogy. Now, the first book was published in 1995, and the last book was published in 2017. So that's a 22-year span of time for the writer. And you can't help imagine how the relationship has matured along with Robin Hobb, because she wrote Assassin's Apprentice when she was 43. That's the first time we see them. And she wrote the last book, Assassin's Fate, when she was 65. So there's a lot of maturity to how their relationship has evolved through the decades. And basically, Fitz is sort of the hero-type character who has magic powers. He's trained as assassin. He's a bastard son of a king. And the Fool is this weird, mystic, androgynous, you're not really sure of their gender, and develops a relationship with Fitz, which is non-sexual. And that was always the interesting thing about it, because the relationship is so close, but so platonic. And I've never really read anything quite like it. And their journey and the relationship as it evolves up to the final trilogy, the very last book of the trilogy, oh my gosh, I was crying buckets. I don't usually cry reading books, but part of it was just knowing these characters for such a long period, because I started reading the books when they first came out. So I've had time to grow along with Robin Hobb, and it's just amazing. The relationship is amazing.
Then we have Tug of War, and this is a book that you have very mixed feelings about.
Well, The Wasp Factory. That book, I'm not sure how I'm going to talk about it. It's one of those books where you want to give trigger warnings or talk about it, but anything you say will be a big spoiler. And on one hand, I appreciated it. I don't know if I can say I liked the story, but I appreciated it. And on the other hand, it was so disturbing that I don't know if I really would recommend it to anyone. But I can't deny it's a good book. It's really weird. I have so many mixed feelings.
And then the last prompt is Treats, and this is a book that you are super excited about and are going to reward yourself with by reading.
Well, I keep thinking about the Poppy War series because I still haven't read it. I almost picked it up for Shelve It or Shove It. I didn't, and everyone kept telling me about it. Now I'm seeing a lot of booktubers talking about it, so I really want to read it, but things keep coming up. But at some point, I'm just going to treat myself and read The Poppy War, I hope. Now, Eric opened the door to talk about a beloved pet that has passed away. And for me, I'm really a cat person, but I had this cat, Patchouli, which I got as a kitten when I first moved to San Francisco. And actually, I was a roommate with this woman who actually got the cat, but then she was allergic to the cat, and I was moving out, so I took the cat with her, or with me, and I had that cat for 17 years. Patchouli was my ultimate companion, always curling up next to me, really good with other people, really friendly, and it's just devastating when a companion, an animal companion like that dies, because it really is losing a part of yourself, and you don't really realize how close you were until you experience, the death of a pet that you're really close to, So it took me about a year, probably about a year, before I was completely over Patchouli's passing away, and I would even consider getting another animal. And we did get another cat, but boy, that cat will always be with me. She'll always be in my heart. So I guess I'll tag some people. I guess I'll tag the Bookish Sock. I haven't heard from you in a while, and I think you'll like this tag. And I guess I'll tag Penelope the Paperback Cat, the booktuber with the ever-changing hair. I'll have affiliate links below. Please subscribe to my channel if you aren't already. Give this video a thumbs up, and until we meet again, may all the books you read Be blessed.